3, 2, 1, execute.
Oliver Wallstrom, who's out hurt. Both trying to change it back and he scores! 10 for 23 lifetime in on Sorrows. What a move! Deposits it.
Kachuk with speed, goes back against the grain and scores on the backhand.
A chance to put the Canes in the lead here in the shootout stretch coming up. He scores! To the blocker's side. Svechnikov with
Turn it up to your speakers.
We've reached everyone's favorite time of the year. Well, first it was a trade deadline. Now it's free agency. And oh my goodness, we have set a new record. There's big signings here. Blockbuster deals going everywhere. It's the Silky Mitts crew back to recap, and it's still going on. We're on the second day of free agency, July 14th, 2022. And there's already a lot to talk about. The usual gang is here. Josh Bartosik, Tim Rogers, and I'm Jacob Cheris. All of us have had kind of a mix of emotions, but before we get into the negatives, Josh, you're pretty happy right now, aren't you?
Dude.
It was a mix for you.
Well, I mean, not even getting into actual free agency, but look, you go back to a few days before the draft, or it was the day before the draft with the Tony DeAngelo trade, which, there are several people that were all like, oh, he's such a great player, like yada, 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 all this like junk. He's not that good. He is all offense. I mean, Chuck Fletcher, when they traded him to Philly, even came out and said, oh, we're going to put him in scenarios where he doesn't have to play defense. I'm like, then he's not a defenseman. And you gave him all that money. But not only that, Carolina had a phenomenal draft again. They got Gleb Trukazov in the second round when he was like a projected top 25 pick. I mean, they had a great draft that they always do. And then look, we'll get into it later. I mean, I've got a mixed bag of emotions with Brent Burns, but the Canes finally did a thing and they got someone that can actually score goals, which, I mean, I don't think that's something that I've said in the last 12 years. This is a very weird feeling.
Tim, let's just get right into it. You're not doing too hot.
Why would I be, Jacob? Why would I be?
Well, we're going to get into that right now, pretty much.
Look, why Columbus? Ohio. Oh, okay, Jacob, just transition.
Yeah, okay. Look, we're just going to get right into it. Johnny Gaudreau, the top player on the market this year, doesn't sign with the New Jersey Devils, doesn't sign with the New York Islanders, doesn't sign with the Philadelphia Flyers. Out of nowhere, he goes to the Columbus Blue Jackets, 7 by 9.8 AAV, and I was stunned. I was at work. I checked Twitter. The first tweet I see, Elliot Friedman, Gaudreau, 7 times 9.8 CBJ. I'm like, what? So this was a shock to me because a lot of teams were offering him a lot of money, including those 3 that I just mentioned. And I believe Columbus offered him 7 by 12 or something like that. And he didn't take that. And he takes a 9.8 deal with a team that is, I don't know what the Columbus Blue Jackets are because, they got rid of Atkinson, Foligno's gone, the normal cast, that we've come to know with the Blue Jackets, a while ago with Bobrovsky, Panarin, and Atkinson and those guys. They have a couple good young players, and now you get, the best player on the market in Johnny Gaudreau for a very high price, well-deserved for sure. So guys, what do we make of the fit, or what do we make of the deal, and how is he going to fit in Columbus?
It's very interesting.
Go ahead, Tim. I know that
I can't hold myself back here, Josh. I'm sorry, but look, I think we all thought New Jersey was where it was going to go. Maybe I'm speaking for you guys here, but me specifically, he said he wanted to go home. He had to do right by his family. I was like, okay, he's going to go to New Jersey. Fine. And that's the only other reason the Islanders were in that was because it was close to New Jersey, and maybe the Islanders are in a better situation than New Jersey right now. But and again, if it was the 7 by 12 that Columbus allegedly offered. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. Elliot Friedman, I believe, was the one that reported it. But if he took that deal, the 7x12, I don't think any of us here would be scratching our heads. We'd be like, okay, they gave him Connor McDavid money, so of course he's going to go there because he's getting $12 million a year. It was reported that Calgary offered, I think it was 8x10.5.
Yes.
Which at that point, it's very surprising because, look, me and Josh have a certain feeling when it comes to the Calgary Flames, but I can tell you the Calgary Flames are better than the Columbus Blue Jackets. New Jersey, I believe, offered him a 7x10, and that's not what he took. Now, the Islanders were obviously the team that didn't bump it up to the 9.5. They were at the 9. Boy, am I angry. I'm not going to lie. You know, I'm not a happy camper right now, but it's an interesting fit. I don't think it's going to really help Columbus make the playoffs. I don't think this makes them a playoff team. And so at that point, it's looking at Gaudreau. You would think he, at this point in his career, he's 28 years old. You would think he's going to want to go somewhere that's going to give him the best opportunity to win. And look, it might be my bias, but out of those three teams, the Blue Jackets, the Devils, and the Islanders, the team that's gotten the closest has been the New York Islanders. So if you're making 9.5 mil, which he is, I believe it's 9.5 for the first. I forget how it's structured, but the actual cap hit is 9.75 for Gaudreau, but it's split up where he's like making 9.5 one season and then he's making 10 another. Like it's split up in different ways, but if it's clearly not about the money to him, or else he would have stayed in Calgary. So why not pick the better team? I really don't understand. It doesn't make sense. Obviously, a lot of Islanders fans are upset at Lou Lamoriello right now. I don't know how I feel about it, you know, because do you really want to be paying the guy more than 9.5 mil? I don't know. It's interesting. It's a very interesting dilemma because, yes, he just had an amazing season last season, but he hasn't done it consistently on a consistent basis. And Josh, I know, can back me up. He doesn't do it in the playoffs. So it's very interesting, and I don't think it's a good fit for him. I think Columbus is probably feeling really happy right now because they definitely got the big fish and on honestly a pretty solid deal. But if I'm Johnny Gaudreau, or if I'm a Calgary fan, if I'm a New Jersey fan, if I'm an Islanders fan, I'm not feeling terrible because it's him not making the right choice, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, this whole thing didn't really make a whole lot of sense. I mean, I have to agree, Tim. I really thought that New Jersey was going to be the place. I mean, you have such a young core with guys like Hughes and Nemec, who they just signed, and Nico Hischier and all of these guys. And you expect, okay, that's a team that, you know, given another top player, you know, they just got Dougie Hamilton last offseason. They come in and they get John Gaudreau this year. They could, you know, make some serious noise. Whereas, you know, the Islanders, you know, they just really had just the one down year. You know, they made the Eastern Conference Finals. They were one goal away from making the Stanley Cup final. I know I keep bringing that up, and it's pain for you, Tim, but they're definitely the better team. This doesn't make any sense I get that. It doesn't make sense for Johnny Gaudreau to make this move, but it doesn't make sense for Columbus to even go anywhere near Gaudreau, because this team, you know, they offloaded everyone after they got rid of Bobrovsky and Panarin and Cam Atkinson and Brandon Dubinsky when he used to play there. And so, you know, you're like, okay, they're doing a rebuild. You know, you get rid of Pierre-Luc Dubois, you bring in Patrick Laine, and throughout the entire season, the question is, will they be able to re-sign Laine? Can you have people willing to stay in Columbus and Ohio? Because that was the main thing with Artemi Panarin and Bobrovsky. They didn't want to stay. They could have. They all got offered ludicrous deals and didn't stay. So technically, it's good for Columbus that they were able to get, you know, the big fish, because yes, people for some reason want to go play hockey in Ohio. But why not do it in a time when you're in a better spot to win now? You're in the Metro Division. With the way that the other teams are structured now, specifically teams like Carolina and the Rangers and, you know, Pittsburgh and Washington are still technically threats in there. What are you doing? This makes it seem like you're a team that's going all in for a playoff push, and you shouldn't be. Like you really don't have the pieces. Voracek is very old and has not been playing well. Nyquist is on the last year of his deal. He's not going to be doing great. Bjorkstrand is fine. But you don't have the cap to sign Patrick Laine. So I don't really understand why you take out Patrick Laine, who's younger. Granted, didn't put up 115 points, but he's younger, and it doesn't make sense from a general manager standpoint for Columbus to go out and get the big fish in Gaudreau for a team that's not anywhere near playoff contention, and then to also follow it up and give Eric Gabranson a 4x4, which is one of the worst contracts I think we saw in free agency. It doesn't make any sense. I liked what Columbus was doing this year in terms of a rebuild, and now I don't really understand what direction they have. And for teams like the Islanders and the Devils, and specifically the Flames, mostly the Islanders and the Devils, you know how bad of a look it is when you offer a guy so much money and he chooses Columbus over your franchise? That just goes to show how pathetic of a state your team is in. Tim, I'm not trying to harp on you because I know you're an Islanders fan, but that's a really big sting, specifically for Calgary, knowing that they gave him that huge offer and he took less money to go play for a worse team. It's just mind-boggling. Calgary, I don't know what they're going to do. I mean, I'm glad that they finally realized that they can't win with this core, but at this point, you might as well blow everything up. If you're going to lose Gaudreau, just lose everything. But again, I don't understand what Columbus is doing. I don't like the fit. I get that it's technically kind of close to home, but like Tim mentioned, you're nearing 30. Go to a team that can win. Don't go to a team that just started a rebuild. This makes no sense. Absolutely none.
Well, Johnny Gaudreau just said, I'm following, the press conference, I'm not here to, I don't have it with me, but he said, I'm here to win hockey games. So I find that, very, very interesting. I think he's definitely going to make the Blue Jackets offense way better. I don't think there's a question about that. Gaudreau is just that type of player. He's not going to carry the team all the way to the playoffs, I don't think, especially with how good the East is. But yeah, this came completely by surprise. And let's talk about the Flames for a bit, because they still have Matthew Tkachuk, who's an RFA that they are probably going to sign. He's rumored to be, their future captain, right? And with Gaudreau gone, and there seems to be some internal issues with the Calgary Flames management because, yes, Gaudreau wanted to play closer to home, but it seemed like it just seems like there's some stuff going on in that organization right now, and Matthew Tkachuk still hasn't signed yet. And I think Calgary, I think they're probably still going to be good because they're in a
Terrible division. Terrible.
Yes, they are in the Pacific Division. So I couldn't think if they were in the Central or Pacific, but yeah, they're in the Pacific Division. And they still have good offensive pieces, but I'm wondering what's going to happen with Matthew Tkachuk. Like I said, they still have his rights because he's an RFA, but that's a question.
The big thing though is it's not just Tkachuk. It's also Mangiapane, who had an absolutely breakout season last season too. I mean, he is also an RFA right now.
I did not know that.
And so, I mean, the thing is, they have a load of cap space right now. I think they have around $20 million of cap space.
18.4.
They can absolutely sign these two players. I think getting rid of Gaudreau is a step in the right direction for the Calgary Flames. And I think that they need to switch their core to Tkachuk, to Mangiapane, to those type of younger players where it's not that you're rebuilding because of how poor the Pacific Division is, because you can still be very competitive. I do think Edmonton got better, and obviously we know that LA got better with Fiala. But you're looking at this team now that is, I think, starting to finally pick a direction for themselves, and that's to get the right pieces for this team and what pieces fit this team. I don't think it's a terrible loss for them with Gaudreau. I mean, obviously, it sounds like they were going to give him whatever it took to bring back Johnny Hockey, but he just didn't want to come back to them. But I don't think if you're a Flames fan, you're too upset right now, because it's not like Johnny Hockey was your only top tier piece. Because if he was your only piece to the team, piece of the puzzle, if you will, then that's definitely a backstabbing gut wrench feeling. You know, I can remember when somebody signed in 2018 on July 1st and went to the Toronto Maple Leafs because, you know, he was another team's only piece. That was a gut-wrenching feeling for them. But here you got Matthew Tkachuk. Here you got Andrew Mangiapane. These guys are stars, man. And how many goals? Mangiapane hit 40 goals last season. Am I right in saying that?
Mhm.
I think so,
Believe
yeah.
so.
He lit it up in the playoffs.
He did great in the playoffs. And, I mean, I don't think Markstrom's going to be as good as he was this year. But I think he's a little bit more consistent in net for you. Your defense, I mean, Canes legend Noah Hannafin's in there, like, but you actually have a direction, in my opinion, because if you're looking at your stars of the team, if you will, Tkachuk's 26, Mangiapane's 24, Hannafin is 25. Most of your defense is young. I think who is it? Rasmus
Anderson is 25.
Anderson. Thank you. He's 25 as well. You're younger. You're adapting to the game right now. You're adapting to the change of the NHL, which is to get younger and to get quicker. And that's what they're doing. I think they'll still make the playoffs. Do I trust them in the playoffs? Absolutely not.
I don't.
But do I think they'll get to the
Wait,
playoffs?
hold on, Cheris.
I said I don't anymore.
That's right. That's right. I wonder who knew that since
Yeah,
day
I
one.
wonder
Yeah.
Wonder who called
I've been
that.
saying this since like October. That's so weird.
Interesting. But overall, I think if you're a Flames fan, obviously you're going to miss Johnny Gaudreau for what he did for you guys, and it kind of put you guys on the map for a little bit. But I wouldn't be too heartbroken.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I could agree. I think their defense is definitely in the right direction. I think Noah Hannafin, if he can finally, you know, keep his game the way that, you know, there's a reason he was taken with the 5th overall pick by the Carolina Hurricanes. And then, you know, in his play this past season, there were glimpses where he showed that. Zadorov is decent. Rasmus Anderson's really solid. You got Oliver Shillington too, who is an RFA this year, but if you can get him re-signed, he's good. Valimaki's a great defensive piece as well. The only issue I have right now with Calgary Flames is you only have 8 forwards you only have 6 forwards, technically 7 forwards under contract for next season, if you include Sean Monahan, who spent the majority of the season injured. If you can get Matthew Tkachuk and Mangiapane back, then you have, you know, 9 guys, which is enough. But if someone goes down with injury, like, you don't really have anyone to take that spot, and you just still have some old guys in your forward core. You got Tyler Toffoli, who's 30. Milan Lucic is 34. He's been terrible since he left Boston. Michael Backlund has been one of the worst players of the last 5 years, and he's making over $5 million a year. So I think that if they really are going to go in the right direction, they need to find a way to offload guys, specifically Michael Backlund. I get that he's your alternate captain. You just lost a big piece of Johnny Gaudreau. But if you're trying to get younger, you can't have these big contracts weighing you down for guys that aren't performing. And your prospect pool isn't great on the forward front. You're not one of those teams that, you know, you're not a Los Angeles or a New York Rangers team where you're just loaded with talent throughout your farm system. They really don't have anyone. I mean, besides losing Gaudreau, they signed Kevin Rooney, so he can fill in. He can be a depth centerpiece, but they don't really have anyone that makes a whole lot of sense in this new young direction that you would hope that they would go, given that they just lost Johnny Gaudreau. That's, like you said, it's not really a rebuild, but a retool around your younger guys. Blow it up. Blow up the forward core. It's clearly not winning. Keep Mangiapane and Tkachuk and get rid of everyone else that you can. That's just what needs to be done. If you genuinely think, because you're not beating Edmonton if you make it to the playoffs again, you're not beating Los Angeles if they make it this year, you're not making it very, like, this is not a team that is built for a deep playoff push, and certainly not a Stanley Cup. So at that point, just just blow it up. Like that's my main thing. I've been saying that for years with the Calgary Flames because they just always underperform in the playoffs. And everyone's kind of known, or at least should have known, besides Jacob Cheris, of course, that this core was never going to take them to a Stanley Cup. They were never going to win with this core. They have been underperforming year after year after year when all of their guys were in their prime. And now all of a sudden you have, your older core that hasn't performed in years. And now you're relying on two guys in Mangiapane and Tkachuk to carry a team. So if you're going to really try and stay competitive, you need to do some serious retooling. I think this is still a long off season for several teams. I think Calgary is a team at the top of that list when it comes to long off seasons.
I will say really quick, Jacob, before you go, you're right. They definitely need to. But if you look at their contracts, they're expiring in 1 to 2 years. Like this is the last year of Lucic's contract. This is the second to last year of Backlund's contract. The second one for a Lindholm. The second to last for Toffoli. Like they will be getting younger. This is the second to last one for Tanev. Like they will be getting younger. It's just right now. I think you have. I don't ever want to say like you have to accept mediocrity, but that's what they have to do right now. They have to accept the fact being a mediocre team for 1 to 2 years, and then pick the right pieces throughout free agency. I think their main goal was trying to sign Johnny Gaudreau, re-sign him, bring him back. So I think maybe this one is a little bit of a, I don't want to say a wash of a free agency, but it's not great. However, with the cap space they do have, I think Nazem Kadri would fit perfectly with them. I think that could be
say that.
Yep. I think that could be a huge piece for them. And that's a piece that's in the right direction. Yes, is Kadri a bit older in age? Yes, but that would at least keep you consistent for a few years and keep you, you're giving weapons at least to Tkachuk and Mangiapane now. You're giving them somebody to take that center line with you. So yes, they have to get rid of the older guys, but it's happening based on just how their contracts are laid out.
And one team that hasn't, with that, we're going to transition to one team that hasn't gotten younger quite yet. The Pittsburgh Penguins re-signing Evgeny Malkin and Chris Letang. Malkin gets a 4x6, Letang a 6x6, I believe. And those two are going to be Penguins for life. It's going to be Crosby, Malkin, and Letang until all of them retire. They also signed Rickard Rakell. So I'm going to start with Chris Letang because he was the first one who gets signed. The AAV is good. The term, though, that was a bit skeptical. 6 years for, an aging defenseman who is still very good. Don't get me wrong, but, that's going to be past Malkin's deal. I mean, they probably think he could still play at that high of a level. But, he's not one. I mean, I think both of them definitely deserve to stay because they're franchise icons, and the Penguins are in win now mode. And Sidney Crosby, who
okay. Win now mode is a bit extreme for a team that has a ton of guys that are on the wrong side of 30. But continue.
Well, win now mode meaning they're going to try and do everything they possibly can to get Crosby, Malkin, Letang another cup. They're trying to keep their Stanley Cup window open. It's not going to happen. I agree with you. I don't think they're going to win another cup with this core, but I'm just saying what the organization is thinking. That's what I was trying to get at. So Chris Letang, I think he was top 10 in points among D this year again. And Malkin, he's had health issues. He took a very big discount, which was, that was big and good on him. The negotiations were going extremely poor, and he said he was going to hit the market. And then the eve of free agency, he signs, and Sidney Crosby had a lot to do with it. Crosby wants to win with those guys. So what do we think of each deal, and how is it going to affect the Penguins moving forward?
I mean, look, you said it first with Letang. That term is atrocious. I mean, you're going to be paying a guy that's going to be $6 million. Granted, offensive wise, hasn't dropped off too much. Defensively, yes, he has. Not to the point where it's going to become a huge liability. But you just re-signed a guy for 6 years who is showing huge declines in his ability to play the game of hockey. Getting Malkin back is fantastic. I'm very happy for them for doing that. But maybe you wouldn't have had such a scare if you didn't give Ricard Raquel a massive contract that made absolutely zero sense. You gave him $5 million for 6 years for a dude that really has not shown that he can keep up the level that he was a couple of years ago. It doesn't make sense. It makes absolutely zero sense to me. They are out of cap space right now. And they have one pretty big restricted free agent in Kasperi Kapanen that they need to re-sign, and he's kind of their only young piece that is capable of scoring goals. Yes, Jane Gensel is technically on the younger side, but he's 27. Kasperi just turned 25.
How old is Brian Russ?
Brian Russ is 30.
Oh, wow, I didn't know.
He's old.
No.
This is
He
an
doesn't
old
play like he's
team.
old. I'll say that though. I mean,
Yeah.
give
There's
him
that.
credit
He
there,
plays
but
phenomenally. My thing is that your youngest guy that can score goals, because we don't really count Drew O'Connor as a guy that can score goals, is Kasperi Kapanen at 25. You have to offload someone now. Who are you going to offload? You really can't get rid of a lot of these contracts if you're supposedly in win now mode. I get keeping the core together.
I've heard Jason Zucker. That's what
who's
I've
going to
heard.
take that? Who's going to take that?
Right.
You take that.
Yeah.
Granted, it's 1 year.
Just like how the Flyers wanted to move JVR to sign
the Flyers are a
Gaudreau, and
different
that
story.
no one took on that contract.
Because the Flyers, if they didn't sign Tony DeAngelo, would have had enough money to get Johnny Gaudreau. So they have to think. So Tony DeAngelo is their Johnny Gaudreau. Congratulations, Philly. You played yourselves.
Big losers this offseason so far. Big losers.
But this is the thing. Like, this is not a very young team at all. And their prospect pool is terrible. Absolutely terrible. Because they were so dominant for so long. They didn't really need to worry about prospects. What I don't really understand is the direction this team is going in. I get keeping the core together. And like, yes, Crosby, Malkin, and Letang are the guys you need to keep. What about these other guys? Like, why Ricard Raquel for so long? He's not getting any younger. He's 29, and his play has decreased immensely. It doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense. The defensive core is pretty bad as well. John Marino had one good year and then fell off the face of the earth. Marcus Pettersson doesn't know how to play hockey anymore. And your goaltending situation is terrible too. It's Tristan Jarry and Casey DeSmith. Tristan Jarry doesn't have a glove hand when it comes to the playoffs, and Casey DeSmith.
Jari actually had a good year. I'm pretty sure. Jari had a good year.
And then he got
regular
injured.
season.
And then
Yeah,
regular
no,
season.
I know. Well, he got hurt in the playoffs, and he was playing with a broken foot.
How did he do last
Right.
playoffs?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's
Cheris.
Huh?
They can do as well as they want in the regular season. You know who else did really well in the regular season and fails every time? The Calgary Flames. Look where they
Yeah.
are now. Look where they are now.
we
So
get
true.
it. We
So true.
we
Or the
get it,
Carolina
but
Hurricanes.
I don't mind the Raquel signing just because of the fact that he was new. He had 13 points in 19 games. I think he would be good in a middle six role. I don't,
But not
think,
for that long. And for
Yes,
that much
I know.
money.
Yeah,
But at that point, I just would have kept Kapanen. I would have rather
Exactly.
had Kapanen at that point. And the thing with Pittsburgh, it reminds me so much of the Kings of old and the Blackhawks of old, doing whatever it takes to keep the core together so they can have one more run, one more time. Look how that worked out for both of us.
I did see a tweet
And Detroit.
saying
Detroit did that for years.
That is true. That is true as well.
Detroit would go out and do whatever they possibly could to try and keep basically their playoff streak alive, which is similar to what Pittsburgh is doing here. And they were terrible. Granted, they got saved because Steve Yzerman is a heck of a GM and saved their franchise by coming back. But if he didn't,
You're right.
Detroit could be
You're right.
Detroit could be a team that we were talking about in the bottom of the barrel for the next 30 years. And that's the direction that Pittsburgh is going because Ron Hextall is not a good general manager. Not only is he a guy that played on your rival team in the Philadelphia Flyers. That's issue number one. He also has made he's made terrible moves for Pittsburgh. It doesn't make any sense. They are.
he almost cost a Malkin too, just from one.
Signing Ricard Raquel, a dude that you had for 3 months, you're going to try and keep over one of your franchise cornerstones.
Yeah,
I still
Unreal.
have an issue with the Letang deal, in my opinion. I think the money's
do as
great.
well.
I really do. But that term for a guy who hasn't played 82 games or a full season, obviously with COVID and everything, who hasn't played a full season since 2011. Really? That reminds me a lot of Drew Doughty. Like Drew Doughty got that huge payday. Well deserved at the time. Don't get me wrong. Drew Doughty absolutely deserved it. Has he played a full season since? No. Was he there for the Kings in the playoffs this year? No. What about Brent Burns? Obviously, the cap for the Canes is really good for them right now, but how much was he making? 8? Has he played a full season? Has he been good? We're seeing age.
He played a lot. He did play the most minutes at any NHL defenseman this year, but he also was injured because he was the only defenseman left.
Right. But here's the thing. The age and the way that the game is, these defensemen cannot keep going for year after year after year after year. Letang's going to be 41 years old when this contract ends. 41. You expect him to be at this level, at least minimum, for 6 years? Really? To me, it's a boneheaded decision. And it's just, I hate to say this because I don't like to blame the players, but you're basically doing whatever Sidney Crosby wants instead of what's best for the team. And I don't know if Crosby knows what's best for the team right now because he wants to keep his boys around. Is that what's best for the team?
Yeah, I did. I saw a tweet like that. Like, is it worth, 4 straight playoff exits? You're running it back just to have these names back in your organization. But they have one of the greatest players of all time. They want to retire Penguins. But
that's the issue exactly right there is that, yes, there's camaraderie and a family when it comes to hockey, but it's also a business.
Yeah. Running
a professional hockey team and winning and being a successful and a championship building team is a business. And there becomes a point where you have to realize that, yes, having the boys around is great, but the best days are far behind this group, and they would have been much better off offloading some of these guys and getting massive returns. Granted, you can't get rid of Sidney Crosby. He's a franchise cornerstone. But these other guys, yes, Malkin's great, but Malkin's had injury problems too. You could have gotten rid of some of these contracts and some of these players, gotten a boatload of picks and prospects and start building for the future because your prospect pool is so dry. And that's the thing that happened with the Kings. Like Tim said, it's what happened with the Red Wings. It's what happened with the Blackhawks. Look at where those teams are now. Pittsburgh is trending in a very bad direction. Yes, they will probably still find a way to make the playoffs because Sidney Crosby is that good of a player. But it's going to be similar with the Washington Capitals. They're not going to make it out of the first round. They're not going to do anything. It doesn't make any sense. Keeping the boys around is one thing, but you can't keep having this false idea that your team is in a win now mode because that's what some of these moves are making it seem like. Bringing back Rickard Rakell at that cap hit for that many years makes you think that you still have a Stanley Cup window, and you don't. You don't. You just don't.
Well, I think if Letang and Malkin were free agents like 3 years ago, like after the Penguins won back-to-back cups, so like after they lost to Washington, like when they were still kind of in that window, I think if they were free agents then yes, like I think it would be worth keeping those guys around because, you think you could still contend. But yeah, those boys are going to be together for the rest of their careers. And yeah, they're franchise players. And
they can be in the basement together in 3 years. That's so cute.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk now about the goalie carousel because there was a lot of goalies. And I think the biggest one on the market was probably Darcy Kemper, the reigning Stanley Cup champion. And he goes to the Washington Capitals on a 5-year, $5.25 deal to be their new number one. Washington gets rid of Vitek Vanacek for 2 draft picks. They did not qualify Ilya Samsonov, and he goes to the Toronto Maple Leafs. So now Washington has an established number one goaltender for the first time since 2019-20. That was the last year Braden Holtby was there. And I I like this contract a lot. I think if it was above $6 million, I would have been angry. And I think Kemper will do well in Washington. I think he'll make them. It's certainly an upgrade over what Washington had in goal, where one of them couldn't really, Vanecek or Samsonov can really run away with the starting job. I think it makes them more competitive in the East, but with the other teams getting better, I'm not sure how much of an impact that will have on them. But Darcy Kemper, he's an established number one. I'm curious to see how the Capitals do with an established number one goaltender who's just coming off a Stanley Cup win and is very good on bad teams. We saw that with him in Arizona. So we'll start with Darcy Kemper, then we'll go to, and Jack Campbell to Edmonton. I do want to talk about Jack Campbell. All right, one of you could go ahead about Kemper.
So look, Cheris, I get that you love that your beloved Capitals have a starting goaltender now. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I know.
It really doesn't matter. You would have been better off keeping the younger guy in Samsonov. And look, I do feel for the Capitals in a sense, because the plan they had was technically in the right spot. You bring in Henrik Lundqvist, a very veteran goaltender and a guy who has a lot of experience, to kind of show the reins to a guy like Ilya Samsonov. Then all of a sudden, Lundqvist can't play anymore because he has a heart condition. And so now you have Samsonov and Vanecek being thrown into these roles that they're not really ready for. Developing into a top goaltender takes years. That's why you don't see very many good young goaltenders that are under the age of 25. It takes several years for them to develop properly. And so, yes, their development was rushed. And I feel bad because Samsonov was one of the top goaltending prospects in the National Hockey League coming in, and Washington kind of ruined him. Granted, no fault of their own. They didn't really have anyone that could have, mentored them after Braden Holtby left. But at this point, it doesn't really make sense to come in and bring a guy like Darcy Kemper, who, yes, will stop the puck for the most part. But this is a team that, like the Pittsburgh Penguins, is not going to make a deep cup run. And they have a lot of unrestricted free agents after this season. Connor Brown, which you guys just traded for, UFA after this season. Lars Eller, Garnet Hathaway, Connor Sheary, Marcus Johansson, who just got re-signed. But your entire defensive core, besides John Carlson, is gone after this year. They're gone. And so it's one of those things where, similar with Pittsburgh, if it comes to that point of the trade deadline, all Washington needs to worry about now, it's not about winning another cup. It's making sure that Ovechkin can at least try to break Gretzky's record. So you could work that around slightly in the trade deadline and also find a way to get, pieces for the future, because they are similar to Pittsburgh in the fact that they don't have the best prospect pool. They have a better prospect pool, but not a great one. It's a fine move. But if Darcy Kemper goes down with injury, which he's prone to injury, who else is going to be your goaltender? Charlie Lindgren? Really? Lindgren's going to be your number one? Who's behind him? No one. You don't have any other goaltender.
Max Bucali.
Who? Exactly.
He got a shutout in his NHL debut this year.
That's fantastic.
I want to go back to your point, Tim, before you say about, the Capitals ruining Samsonov. I think he was thrown into an unfortunate circumstance because his rookie season as the backup to Braden Holtby, he actually played really well. Like, his numbers were really good, right? And then COVID happened, and then he had an off-season injury, and then it was supposed to be Samsonov and Lundqvist in a shortened season. And then, like you said, Lundqvist goes down with that heart condition, and it's two young, inexperienced number one goaltenders. And, Dan Rosen, I remember when Lundqvist came in, he goes, he's not going to be a mentor to Ilya Samsonov. Like, Lundqvist is a guy who wants to play, be competitive. I mean, he'll be a professional and stuff like that. But I don't think Washington really ruined Samsonov's development. I just think his career got off to a poor start just because of unfortunate circumstances where you have two inexperienced guys as 1A, 1B goaltenders, and that doesn't really work. You need an experienced guy behind you. I was really upset when the Caps decided, I understand why they didn't qualify Ilya Samsonov because his projected arb, he had arb rights, and that was projected to be $3 million. And for a backup that hasn't really proved himself, you just don't know. So I think he still has a lot of potential. There's no question about it. But I think it was just because he was thrown into unfortunate circumstances and he just didn't have a veteran behind him as the number one goalie.
I would agree with you for the most part on that part, except that they still had the chance last offseason to go out and try and get a veteran goaltender to help Samsonov.
That is true.
And they didn't. So that's my main thing. I
found-
still think that they kind of just went with it and said, oh, well, this is the best we're going to get. I would love to see Samsonov thrive in Toronto, but it's Toronto and goaltenders don't do well there. We've been over that several times in the show, but it's a wait and see. It's a wait and see scenario.
Look, I'll keep it short and sweet. This never happens ever. I'm agreeing with Jacob and I'm disagreeing with Josh. This never happens. This does not happen. But look, I think because Josh, you said that they should not have signed Kemper and they should have kept the youth. I think Samsonov going to Toronto is exactly what he needed and is exactly what Washington needed. I think they had to get rid of him for the fact of, okay, now I think Samsonov could do very well in Toronto for the fact of, I don't think Matt Murray is a good goalie at all. But I think he could be a good mentor for him. And because Matt Murray has won a Stanley Cup, has been to the Stanley Cup twice, all under his rookie contract. So he knows what it's like to play in the playoffs, in those big games. Excuse me. He's been there before. And I think that's what Samsonov has always missed, was that leadership, which is what you guys have talked about. I don't think Washington ruined him. I think he was just in a tough situation.
Right.
However, I would not have gotten rid of Vanacek. I would have kept him. I liked him a lot. I really did. I thought personally, as an Islanders fan, I wanted the Capitals to trade for Varlamov and you gave us Vanacek and something else in return. That's what I wanted because I like Vanacek a lot. I think he could have been a very good backup to Darcy Kemper and even, like a 60-40 split, 65-35 split. I think that could have been really good for Washington because Kemper can't be playing, all these games, which right now I think Washington's going to make him do. If I was Washington, I wouldn't have gotten Kemper. I would have gotten Jack Campbell. That's my point, and that's
or John Gibson.
The John Gibson thing worries me. It does. I have a lot of concerns with that. And for Jack Campbell, I've never seen somebody more passionate about the game of hockey. And I mean, when you saw him lose in the playoffs for Toronto, he put it all on himself, man. Like I felt terrible for the guy. Especially,
and he played phenomenal too in that series.
And especially though last year against the Canadians, he put all of it on him. And I'm like, well, where was Austin Matthews? Where's Mitch Marner? Like, but he took the front of it. He cared so much about winning for that team. And I think Edmonton gets an absolute steal with him. So Jacob, I'm going to transition for you here, but
let's talk about Jack Campbell because I love this addition for the Edmonton Oilers.
I do too. And you know what? We talked about it after Edmonton lost to Colorado. We said if they got a consistent goaltender, they are a consistent playoff contender. Boom, there it is. You had Duncan Keith retire, which was perfect for them. I mean, this now there's serious expectations on Edmonton. And I will say this, if they do not make it past the first round, even if they don't make it past the first round, that's a problem. That's a serious problem. Obviously, if like McDavid's hurt or Draisaitl's hurt, obviously, then if you're fully healthy and you're going into the playoffs with Jack Campbell, with your defense that you have, which is still very shaky, with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl and Evander Kane, who I don't like him, but I still think that's a pretty good deal for them to bring him back because he was very good for them. If you are not a consistent playoff performer or a playoff contender, that is terrible because this deal is a fantastic deal. Jack Campbell for $5 million for 5 years, who's only 30. We know how long goalies can play for. That's a great deal in my opinion. And Jacob, I don't mean to be rude to you guys, but if I was picking between Kemper and Campbell, Campbell's 2 years younger. Obviously, Kemper just won the Stanley Cup, but look who he was playing for.
Right.
And look who Jack Campbell was playing for and what he did. I would have picked Campbell.
I mean, look, my thing with Campbell was that You mentioned him being consistent, which in the playoffs, yes, he was, which is something that Edmonton desperately needs because we know Mike Smith is not an NHL goaltender. He really shouldn't.
Still,
even
I think
be
he's
either.
still under contract.
For one more year.
Oh
One
yeah,
more year.
he is, but he still shouldn't be.
They got to get rid of him.
He shouldn't be playing. I mean, granted, at this point, I'd rather. I mean, do you choose Mike Smith or Stuart Skinner, a guy who hasn't really ever touched NHL ice? My thing with Jack Campbell was that he started last season in the regular season looking phenomenal. And then post All-Star break looked terrible.
I will
with
say
some-
this, and I don't
and-
mean to cut you off.
You're good.
That is on the team. If
Mhm.
you saw how Toronto's defense played in front of them, it was horrendous. Obviously, they had loads of injury. Muzzin went down a couple times, but it was unacceptable. He was standing on his head when he was having those top tier numbers. If you were looking at the expected goals, I mean, the other team was supposed to win by a large sum because that's not Toronto's identity as defense. But I know what you mean.
But
I
here's
know
the
what you mean.
thing. Neither is Edmonton's identity.
right.
And That's
You're right.
that's my one concern. This would be a slam dunk signing if Edmonton had a shred of defense, which I will admit, getting Brett Kulak is a phenomenal addition.
I
Just
agree.
about to
back
say.
end.
I agree.
Phenomenal addition. And having Duncan Keith retire is phenomenal too. Darnell Nurse, Capit's still a bit big, but he is 100% your go-to guy on the back end. Tyson Barrie, after leaving Colorado and Toronto, has really come into his own lately. Cody Ceci is, well, ugh. But Brett Kulak, I loved Evan Bouchard in the playoffs. I thought he was phenomenal. I think
Yeah.
he has a cannon of a shot. I think he'd be really solid for them.
They also have
They-
Clefbaum, right? They have,
He has been on LTIR
He's been
for
out there for a while,
long
but Lefbaum
time.
is a good guy.
he's good when he's healthy, but obviously, with like you said, Jacob, he's been on LTIR for a while, so we'll see how he comes back. But
And
Go to
that's
the
my
final
main
record.
that's my main thing though is defense, and that's why like it's different when it's Mike Smith because Mike Smith has not been a good goaltender since like 2014. Jack Campbell has the ability, and we know he does. He has that capability to be that guy. We saw it in the playoffs. He single-handedly almost carried Toronto in a bunch of those games. We thought he was going to get lit up against Tampa, and he played out of his mind. It just comes down to defense. And granted, Edmonton's defense was a lot better than I expected it to be in this year's playoffs. They got exposed against Colorado, but Colorado exposed everyone. I would love to see Jack Campbell succeed. I just have a little bit of doubt with that defense. And the main thing with Edmonton now is what are you going to do with Puljujarvi and Yamamoto? Because they're both restricted free agents. Puljujarvi has been in loads of trade talks. Everyone's been calling him the next Valerie Nichushkin, which bit of a reach. They have very similar underlying statistics and analytics.
I love that contract for
But it's one of those things where, comparing him to a guy that just got a massive contract might not be the best thing if you're trying to trade for him or sign him to a long-term deal when he was just out of the league for a whole season the year before. I think they'll probably keep Yamamoto. It just comes down to, the offense is not going to be an issue with that team. You got Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. You're going to be fine. They're kind of Leaf-esque in the sense that defense is not really their brand. And that's why it seemed like a lateral move for Jack Campbell, but it is a massive upgrade for the Edmonton Oilers as a team.
I will say real quick, Jacob, before you go, the thing is though, Edmonton gives up those glaring goal scoring opportunities with their defense. And you could take a very educated guess that Mike Smith was not going to make that save. Here's a different story now, because you've seen Campbell do it. Say Edmonton gives up those 3, 4, 5 glaring goal mistakes. You now have a goalie that you can sit back at least a little bit and be like, okay, I think he can save that one, because we've seen him do it. So, and look how far Edmonton went with Mike Smith as their goalie. Now you have consistency back there, at least some sense of it. So that's why I still think this is a great deal for Edmonton, because, and I also think it's a good deal for Jack Campbell because he's getting paid a very solid sum of money. But I think this is a massive improvement that a lot of people aren't talking about.
Yeah. It's something the Oilers have needed for ever since
Years.
like they got McDavid, ever since they lost in the playoffs in 2017. It's like they need a goalie. They need a goalie. If they have consistent goaltending, they're going to go far. Now they finally have it in Jack Campbell. I love this. I love the term. I love the AAV. I love the fit. And the Edmonton Oilers are definitely going to be a threat to watch this upcoming season. All right, let's talk about two teams that made big splashes. We don't really talk about these teams a lot. Like, even on the sin bin, I don't think we've talked about this team at all. The Ottawa Senators are huge winners of this year's free agency class. Stealing Alex DeBrincat from the Chicago Blackhawks.
For nothing.
For nothing. Pierre Dorian fleecing teams like Steve Yzerman. Signing Claude Giroux to a 3-year deal, $6 million AAV. That's a great contract. I was not expecting the Ottawa Senators to be loading up like this. But, you know, they have a ton of draft picks. And now their top 6 is looking like one of the more dangerous ones in the league. Brady Tkachuk, Claude Giroux, Josh Norris, who's very underrated, Tim Stützle, who's going to be a stud in this league, Alex DeBrincat, and Drake Batherson. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, but it certainly would not surprise me if they sneak in. I think they're going to be playing meaningful games in March and April for sure. I think, and Anton Forsberg was actually good for them in goal.
They also got Cam Talbot. They traded for Cam Talbot, which I think is a good move for them too.
I agree with that. And outside of Thomas Chabot on D, you know, they need help there. And I think I wouldn't be surprised if after this season they make more moves and then they're a consistent playoff performer.
I can agree with that. I think that a lot of people were expecting them to try and offload Nikita Zaitsev's contract, which, yes, you could potentially try to do that, but also this is a very young team. You don't want to try and go for an all-in push now. What they've done is built themselves a very nice groundwork for the next year, for the next 2-3 years after this season. And this is a team that also still has $20 million in cap space. $20 million. And they don't have, the only main RFAs that they have right now are Josh Norris and Eric Brandstrom. Those guys are not going to cost you $20 million by any means. They're in a very good spot right now. You have young prospects that can come up. I think Cam Talbot is a great signing for them, 100%. But then you also have Mads Sogard in the minors, who after Talbot leaves, most likely after the season because he just got the 1 year left on his deal, he probably comes up. You have such a team that's just so, I cannot believe that this Ottawa team has turned things around so fast. I really can't. And it all happened because Eugene Melnyk unfortunately passed away. And that's just how it is. Because Melnyk was so cheap and would not let any of this happen. Any of it. Dorian is doing a fantastic job as a general manager. He has been doing phenomenal work. Being able to get Claude Giroux for just $6.5 million for 3 years is phenomenal. Getting Alex DeBrincat for literally nothing but two first round picks. Like, you gave up essentially nothing.
They didn't give up two. They only gave up one first. It was literally one first, a second, and a fourth, I think. It's unreal.
For Alex DeBrincat, for a guy who has 2 40-goal seasons, and this is a team in Ottawa that is loaded with prospects, and Chicago stole absolutely 0 of them. They got 0 of them back. This is a team that is doing fantastic work. I think you made a great point, Jacob. I think they could be playing some meaningful games past January, because we've just really seen that from them recently. I think this is a team that this year finishes, 5 to 10 points out of a playoff spot, maybe a few more points. And then you go in the next season, you've got a bunch of UFAs on the back end, but you can just let them go because they're older guys, and you can come and you can let Jake Sanderson finally blossom. You can let Eric Brandstrom blossom. You can go out and find guys on the free agency market, some trades. This is a team that's moving in a very, very, very good direction. And it's nice to see because, they had such not only was losing in a double OT game 7 to go to the Stanley Cup final heartbreaking, but all the aftermath that came after that, losing their entire core, only having 2 guys.
Erik Karlsson, all this drama behind
Everyone,
that.
Mark Stone leaving, Erik Karlsson leaving, all these guys disappearing. And now you have hope. You have Brady Tkachuk and Alex DeBrincat on the same team for most likely the foreseeable future. And that is phenomenal. And Tim Stutzel. That's unreal. And they still have 20 million in cap space. I don't get it. It's a masterclass, absolute masterclass.
It's honestly incredible because I mean, Jacob, you said it. You alluded to it at least. I mean, Ottawa dealt with so much. I mean, do you remember the Mike Hoffman drama?
Yeah.
With the wives. I mean, and then there was Erik Karlsson, and then there was Duchesne was even in a part of the mix, and then you had the Dzingel that was a part of the mix. It was terrible. It was a terrible scene going on in Ottawa, and nobody thought Ottawa would be relevant again for a long time, and that's including myself. What they did this free agency is an absolute steal, and I mean, trading for DeBrincat for absolutely nothing it's very annoying as an Islanders fan because it's like, well, we could have done that. But when you look at what Ottawa has done here, they have just absolutely improved their team by a large mile. And I mean, the big thing to me is the little moves too. Like the Cam Talbot move is so low risk, high reward. It's incredible. He's a 1-year deal. If you really like him, bring him back. If you don't, okay. Like at least you tried something. And then what Josh said too about the cap space, you can trade for people. Like for example, one guy that comes to mind for me is on the for defensively is on the Seattle Kraken, Vince Dunn. There's a lot of talk about how he doesn't want to be in Seattle anymore. Seattle doesn't really want him. You trade for him, you already improved your defense once again. And he's younger. He's on the younger side. He's a little bit more offensive minded, which I think they could use. But they have that flexibility with all this cap space and their prospect pool. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. And I think Ottawa, to me, is actually the number 1 winner of free agency.
100%.
And I don't think second place is even close. My personal second place is Detroit, but I don't even think they're that close. I just don't think. I mean, you signed Giroux and you got DeBrincat. What else more can you ask for?
Yep. And look, again, I said like in another group chat, like, hey, I don't think they're a playoff team yet, but they're like, are you kidding? Like they're a playoff team now. I'm like, all right, well, it wouldn't surprise me. It certainly wouldn't surprise me if they sneak into the wild card spot because, the teams in the East, like, Washington, Pittsburgh, it wouldn't surprise me if one of those, if not both, miss and Ottawa sneaks in.
They're just in such a tough division, though.
But yes, I know. Ottawa's in the Atlantic, and
which is still top heavy, though.
I still think the top 3, not in any particular order, are Florida, Tampa, Toronto.
And then you have Boston there,
Boston,
too.
Yeah.
But
like you said,
Boston.
I forgot about all the injuries because you don't have
true.
Marchand, you don't have McAvoy.
David Pastrnak still hasn't been extended.
They got some issues there in Boston.
But
I'm telling you, I don't think Boston makes the playoffs next year.
But there's another Atlantic team that's looking pretty good right now too after their free agency that me and Josh talked about in Detroit.
Yeah,
that's like.
So let's talk about them.
That I would have said Ottawa would be my number 1. It's very close between Ottawa and Detroit for me. Because Detroit, for some reason, feels so much closer to a playoff berth.
They're right.
They just do. Because the moves they made were so good. Getting Andrew Kopp for only $5.5 million, phenomenal.
I think he has a lot to prove, though. I think he has a lot because he's going to be in a bigger
has a lot
role.
To prove, but he can play on the second or third line because Dylan Larkin's your number one center. Andrew Kopp could play second line center. He could do whatever you want. Getting David Perron for just 2 years,
absolute steal.
At under $5 million for
absolute steal.
A lot of people thought we're getting upwards of $7 million. You got him for below $5 million. Is phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. Your defense, Ben Sherratt, he has a lot to prove, but solid veteran defenseman that he could he could be a solid veteran defenseman for them. Mark Pysyk is a fantastic. He's the picture perfect third pairing shutdown defenseman that any team wants. And that's what Detroit got. Ville Husso. They just got for essentially nothing. And he's a bona fide starter in the league. Nedeljkovic doesn't have to worry about that anymore because Nedeljkovic was very streaky. You have a guy that's not streaky. You have Ville Husso. This is a team that feels real. I don't know. They feel really good on paper.
How have you
Granted,
not mentioned two names? They weren't free agents, but you were going through the roster. And Mo
I was going through
Seider.
all the new guys. We haven't mentioned the fact that Lucas Raymond and Moritz Seider are, still on that team.
And captain, my captain. I mean, Dylan Larkin. Like this team right here is my sneaky wild card team. This one
in cap space. 10 million in cap.
Well, and think about it too, that like you have now taken a lot of pressure off of Lucas Raymond, off of Philip Zadina. Like he still can develop into something.
And they also got Dominic Kubalik. Did you mention Dominic Kubalik?
I didn't even mention Dominic Kubalik. That's another guy who's
underrated signing. I mean, this team, maybe I actually don't know if they did better than Ottawa. Now us talking about it, I mean, they added so much for so little. I mean, David Perron, is close to a point per game player. I mean, last season when he was there until he got hurt, season before he was a point per game player. And Dominic Kubalik was probably Chicago's one of their best players for when he was there. I mean, obviously DeBrincat and Patty Kane are there, but I mean, Kubalik is probably one of the most underrated signings. And what did they sign him for? $2.5 million? Like that's incredible.
And only for 2 years. So it's more of a prove it deal. And Jacob, back to your point really quickly about Andrew Kopp. Dude had 18 points in the 16 games he played for the New York Rangers. Mm-hmm. So if he can put up points like that, obviously that can't be as consistent, but he can put up points similar to that for $5.5 million. You take that.
But the thing is, you don't even need him to. With these signings that you did, you don't even need to have him be it. You can have Perron be that. You can have Kubalik eventually be there. You can have Lucas Raymond do that eventually. Like what they've done is they've gotten a top 6 of guys that can consistently get you points. Say, for example, Dylan Larkin's having a tough night, or Lucas Raymond, those two are playing together and having a tough night. Then you can rely on guys like Andrew Kopp and David Perron and Dominic Kubalik to get those extra goals for you. And you can get it from the back end too, from Mo Seider and Ben Sherratt, which I thought was a very good deal for them. What was it, 4.75? I think it was. I don't think that's bad at all for him. I think it was 4 by 4.75, I think.
Yeah, I'm looking at it.
Which that's pretty good. And the fact that Nedeljkovic is your backup, that seems pretty good to me. I mean,
don't rub it in.
And
sorry.
I think
you rubbed it into me.
I think a full season of Jacob Vrana will help a lot.
Yes, I completely forgot about that too.
I think that will help them a lot.
Robbie Fabry.
Robbie Fabry will come off injured reserve as well.
I think I think he's good, right? I mean, he's
pretty
a very
solid
good depth scorer. Like, again,
I mean, Pius Suter,
oh my god, I forgot about Suter too.
My god, this team, I think
they're so young.
They're a step above Ottawa because honestly, Detroit was sneaky good this past season. Like, I mean, obviously because of Mo Seider and stuff like that, but
sneaky good. I mean, they weren't 35 point. I mean, they weren't like 60 points out of a playoff spot like they were in years past, but they've been doing everything right. And the main thing that Detroit and Ottawa need to do, or need to be wary of, which I don't think these are teams that are going to do that, is to not get super excited the first time they sniff the playoffs and immediately go all in. They need to play it safe like the Kings have been doing, because the Kings have been doing it phenomenal. They made the playoffs this year, but they didn't go out and, go for Gaudreau and all these guys. They get Kevin Fiala on a pretty nice deal for them. And that's pretty much been their offseason. And they don't need to do anything else.
Yeah, absolutely right.
That's all it is. And when we're talking about Detroit, one name that kind of went under the radar, not for Detroit, but just in free agency, was Andre Burakovsky, who went to Seattle. And Seattle's looking a little good too. I'm not gonna lie.
They're not there yet, though.
Oh no, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that with the fact that they also have $10 million in cap space, but
that was a great signing. That was a great
Their
signing.
forward core now with Burakovsky and these other guys,
And Matty Beniers, who
and
I think is
Shane
gonna win
Wright,
the
who
Calder.
somehow fell to 4. How did Shane Wright fall to 4th?
Unreal.
That's the number one pick or the number one prospect for the last 3 years running falls to 4. Is unbelievable. And they still have Colin and Morgan Geeky to re-sign.
Yeah.
Defense is goaltending is but that forward core is looking like it could actually do something. That's a very young core for them.
It's going to be very competitive. So I'll put you guys on the spot. Are the Detroit Red Wings a playoff team this year?
Yes.
Honestly,
Yes,
yeah,
they
because here's the thing. Florida got really bad. Boston has done not. Florida and Boston got significantly worse. I think Detroit can sneak in because the Metro also didn't really get, besides the teams that you would expect to get better, Metro didn't get any better. Andre Palat's a decent signing for, the Devils, but that's not going to take him over the top. Johnny Gaudreau's not going to lead Columbus to the playoffs.
Not if they don't get Lane, that's for sure.
Yeah, well,
That's for sure.
Philly is going to be a
very,
very interesting year for the East and the division itself. And if we're on the topic of the Metro division, we're going to talk about, Josh is waiting for it. The Carolina Hurricanes.
They did a thing.
They did the thing. They got the score that they needed, which shocked me. Max Pacioretty is a Carolina Hurricane. They also traded for Brent Burns, which, an experienced guy on the back end that probably helps them in terms of the veteran leadership to help guys like Slavin and Brett Pesce. And I'm forgetting names on their D-core now.
Brady Shea, Ethan Bear.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
Bear's a question mark for me.
Here's the thing.
But Max Pacioretty, that's a huge signing, and Carolina just skyrocketed to probably back to, well, they're probably going to.
Okay, I'll put it this way.
Go ahead.
Last year, they were frauds. And we said it multiple times, or I said it multiple times on the talk show that something never sat right with the way that Carolina constructed their team last year. And Jacob, you call me out. You're like, why are you complaining? Your team's first in the Metro. You guys are, top of the league. Look what happened when you get complacent. You choke in Game 7 to the New York Rangers. This now feels like a step in a very good direction for the Carolina Hurricanes because they finally addressed an issue without avoiding it. Because for all these past years, they've gone like, oh, we need scoring. So it's depth scoring. So let's go and get Jordan Martinook and Jesper Fast and all of these guys. And let's trade for Max Domi of all people. They realize that that's not going to do it. And so they get a guy who's only been known for scoring goals in Max Pacioretty. And that's for nothing. And they get a pretty solid prospect in Dylan Coughlin, who is a pretty big boy. Depending on how he develops, you could see him on Carolina's blue line in a couple of years. It's a team that's in a very good direction because Max Pacioretty, because here's the thing, Carolina's forwards, they are very hot and cold when it comes to actually deciding whether they want to show up or not. Max Pacioretty shows up every day, every game. When he's healthy, he shows up, and it's 1 year at $7 million. There's no risk, very, very high reward for them. The Brent Burns thing, at first, I was not a fan because I really wanted Carolina to push hard for John Klingberg. Because John Klingberg is similar in the sense that he's a very offensive defenseman and he's younger. But now looking back at it, I think what Carolina did may have been a smarter move because John Klingberg was going to ask for about 7 years and about $6 or $7 million. And he's younger, but he's not super young. Brent Burns, you get him for only only 2/3 of his contract for just about 3 years is not terrible. And that's a guy that, you mentioned it earlier, Tim, he's kind of like Tony DeAngelo besides, having morals and being a good human being.
I think he also probably plays
He also does play defense. Shockingly,
a bit more defense in his own zone.
That plays defense, which Tony doesn't know what that is. But they've had a very solid offseason. And obviously they're not done. The main thing for Carolina right now is finding a way you have to find a way to fit in Martin Necas into your lineup now because of the way that you have constructed your team. Getting a guy like Max Pacioretty, where does Martin Necas fall exactly? Because you have about $4 million in cap space. You could give that to Martin Necas, sure, but then you got Ethan Bear, who you absolutely. Ethan Bear played phenomenal before he had COVID and was out long term with a COVID injury, and then came back and he was never the same. You have about $4 million to get Martin Necas and Ethan Bear re-signed. I think that needs to be Carolina's top priority. I think losing Niederreiter is going to be tough because I just don't think there's any way they can bring him back now, unless you get rid of a guy like Jake Gardner's contract. But the fact that Carolina lost two of their best pieces and got better is something that I don't think would ever come out of my mouth with Don Waddell as a general manager for any hockey team, because he single-handedly threw Atlanta to the ground. And after last offseason and this trade deadline, I was like, oh my God, he's going to do the same thing to Carolina. They're looking good. Very young. I mean, Max Pacioretty has playoff experience. Brent Burns has playoff experience. And then we're completely forgetting the fact that they signed Andre Kasha, who is that's a very underrated signing. I mean, granted, a little bit of bias because I'm a Carolina Hurricanes fan, but Andre Kasha was a hot commodity a year or two ago. And yes, he had a down year with Toronto, but I mean, he could fit really well into a middle six or even a bottom six role for the Carolina Hurricanes, who now, they, even without Niederreiter or Trocheck, still have a very, very good top six that they could roll out on any given night.
I'll keep it nice and short. Last time we talked about the Carolina Hurricanes, I called them the Calgary Flames of the East, not just because of their playoff woes, if you will, but for them not changing anything. That changed this offseason for them. They decided to actually do something. They decided, like, okay, enough's enough. Let's make our team actually better, and let's make the top of it better. It was incredible for them to get Max Pacioretty for nothing. That is an absolute bargain. And the more I'm very similar to Josh in this way. We always get along. We always agree on most things. But the thing is, the more and more that I think about this Brent Burns deal, the more and more I like it. I mean, he's a big dude, man. Like, he is a huge body to have on the defense, which is important. You need a guy that can use his size when he needs to. And the way that Brent Burns also does it is in the offensive zone. People try to push him off the puck. When do you see that happen? Nobody can. Maybe Dustin Bufflin could back in the day, but nobody can touch him. And it's one of those things where Josh is going to hate me for saying this. Carolina is now the favorite in the Metro. They're definitely in the number one seed for the Metro now, and they got to do something about it, or else they will still be known as the Calgary Flames of the East, in my opinion. If they cannot make it past the second round once again, it's going to make a lot of people start scratching their heads and make it even more of like a Toronto situation of, okay, they just literally can't get past the second round. Something's wrong. Or a Washington Capitals situation of the old. So it's going to be very interesting. I like what Carolina did a lot. I still think they're better than the Rangers. I still do. But they got to prove something now. They really have something to prove, and it looks like they know that, and they're taking that step though. So,
and you have a great point. This is now, it's been a lot of regime defining the off seasons for Carolina, specifically last year when they went a completely different route and got worse in every department besides goaltending. This year they got better in every department besides goaltending because they don't really need to. I mean, Anderson and Ranta, when healthy, are great. And if one of them goes down with injury, Coach Chekhov is a great guy. You don't want to throw him in too early, but he's that goaltender of the future that Carolina's been desperately looking for. As long as they don't pull in Alex Nedeljkovic with him. The main thing with Carolina is that this is, as it stands, one of the biggest years to come for them, because yes, Pacioretty just has the 1 year left. If you want to re-sign him, you technically could, but he's going to be 34, and he's going to be on the wrong side of 30 by the time that contract starts hurting. Jordan Staal is most likely going to retire after this offseason. That's a huge loss in the middle six. He doesn't score a lot, but he is one of the biggest on-ice factors in the National Hockey League. Jesper Fast's contract is up. Andre Kosh's is up. And then you also have both of your goaltenders that are going to be UFAs next year as well. So that's a huge thing for them because you probably won't be able to keep both of them, especially if Frederik Andersen has another Vezina type season. And then the season after that is the biggest one of all. Carolina, these next 2 years is cup or bust for Carolina, 100%, because in 2 years, Aho, Teravainen, Shea, and Pesce are all unrestricted free agents. Hate to say it, there's no way you keep all four. Absolutely no way you can keep all four of those guys, especially with the way that Teravainen and Aho have been playing. It's not possible. You have 2 years, maybe even one, depending on your goaltending situation, to prove or at least with this strong of a core to make a deep push. And this is I think this is a big year for them. And I think that's why you're finally seeing them make the right moves. I think a lot of people were disappointed when they didn't go all in on the trade deadline, myself included. And looking back on it, you can realize that it's maybe not necessarily their season when you see how Colorado went out and just built a super team with the way that they were constructed and how Tampa was. These next 2 seasons are Carolina's years, in a sense that if they don't make it out of the East in one of those 2 years, their core has been a failure, and it just has, because you don't have a lot of guys signed past the next 2 seasons besides Kotkaniemi and Svechnikov. Those are your 2 guys that are signed past 2025. That's it. Your only guys. And so they'll have a lot of work to do. And it's another one of those things where, before it was just, good on Carolina for making the playoffs because it's been so long. There's a team that has expectations now, and they know that, and that's why they've been making these pushes. I don't think they're done because they have their restricted free agents that they need to sign, and they don't have all the cap space in the world. I don't think there's a lot. I think that there's a lot more movement to be made in this offseason as a general, because Nazem Kadri still isn't there. He hasn't been signed anywhere. But these are going to be some very crucial weeks for a lot of teams, and Carolina is one of those teams.
Yep. I just saw a funny tweet saying Brent Burns saying to Rod Brindamore, I do not want to do a push-up contest with him. Rod the Bod, Brindamore. All right. Well, final thoughts before we end the podcast. This is a longer edition, but there was a lot to talk about. And I kept refreshing Twitter to see if Kadri or someone was signed. Nothing has happened yet.
Well, I like to spice things up. Where do you guys think Kadri's going?
Ooh.
See,
I liked what you said about him going to Calgary. I think that could be a really good fit. I think also the Islanders have I think the Islanders could go. I think any team can benefit from a guy like Nazem Kadri, someone who could, mix it up a bit, and a guy who could score and play in your top 6, and just do all the little things right. Oh man.
I think Calgary is.
I think Calgary might be.
But here's another thing. Nazem Kadri is great. A team that really has been pretty quiet this offseason, but not necessarily on the cusp of anything, but given if they have Nazem Kadri could help things. I know you might laugh, but the Buffalo Sabres have been pretty quiet this offseason. And they're a team that is pretty young besides Jeff Skinner and Kyle Pozo. They could use some wing help. They're pretty solid down the middle because you got guys like Tage Thompson and Peyton Krebs and Dylan Cousins and Casey Middlestat. But you've got those guys that you can maybe see. I think also maybe the Devils could also make a push if they just didn't get Gaudreau. You could see him go anywhere. It's tough. It's definitely tough.
And Colorado's not out of the race yet. They could still re-sign him.
I don't think they can afford him though. That's the problem right now. I don't think they have the money.
They only have $4 million in cap space.
I'm gonna go bold because I like to have fun with these things. I say he lands in Ottawa. I think Ottawa grabs one more big fish to go all in on the playoffs right now. And if that's the case, then oh boy. But they clearly have the cap space for it, even with their RFAs, because there's not that many top tier ones, if you will, for them. I think that could be really interesting. I think he would be a good fit in Ottawa too.
I'll do you one better, Tim. You know what's gonna happen? Nazem Kadri goes back to Toronto, and John Tavares gets traded for future considerations to the Ottawa Senators.
Oh God!
Oh,
Wow!
my God.
Wow! That's bold right there.
It's pretty bold. Don't be shocked when it happens. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'll give you $100 if that happens.
Yeah. And I swear, if we stop the recording and Kadri gets signed, I'm gonna be.
That's exactly
really
what's gonna happen. That's
It's gonna
exactly
happen.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, refreshing Twitter. Nothing has happened yet.
Oh,
That's gonna
wait, hold
do it
on.
for this
Well,
edition.
there's one thing. You did say the Senators might go for a big piece. They are pushing heavy for John Klingberg as we speak.
Who?
Oh God! Oh
The
God!
Senators.
Oh my
Oh
God.
my
See,
goodness!
that
That would be
that's
huge
the
for
kind
them.
of defenseman that they would benefit from. But
That
I
would
did
be
hear also
huge.
he was gonna he could.
He started
circle
talking
back
with
to
Dallas
Dallas.
again. Yeah, he started talking with Dallas again.
Yeah, but
I forget why.
but here's the thing.
Dude,
Ottawa
that's
can
another.
give-
That's
Ottawa can
another
give him
big
all
piece
that
we
money.
completely forgot about. I completely forgot that John Klingberg's a free agent. Like I completely forgot about it.
Because
The defense market has been kind of broken.
Wow, completely forgot.
That's
Yeah.
Yeah, Nick Leddy getting 4x4. Get out of here, dude. He's not that good. Get out. I feel bad for St. Louis. They just got significantly worse.
Yeah. All right. Well,
our first line.
with that, that's going to do it for this edition of the Silky Mitts podcast. Thank you all for tuning in, and we are really excited for the rest of free agency and what moves our teams will probably mess up or
My team's
Yeah.
doing phenomenal. I can't speak for you two.
yeah. I mean, Tim's not doing too hot anyways.
No. You're lucky I didn't go on a rant. You're lucky.
That is that we have the sin bin for that.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Oh,
Exactly.
they start 0-25 next year.
Hey,
All right.
that's
Thank
enough.
you for listening.
Hey everybody, thank you for tuning into this edition of Penn State Sports Night. We hope you liked that segment.
And we're sure there's other Penn State Sports Night segments that you're going to love as well. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content.
And check us out on social media for updates and behind the scenes clips and pics. Follow us on Twitter at PSSN TV and on Instagram at PSU Sports Night to keep up with all the action.
For all of us here at the Belisari Media Center, we are
Penn State Sports Night.